Hello and welcome to the Justice Factor. It's been more than a week since members of the terror group Al-Shabaab invaded a Kenyan shopping mall and murdered children and innocent adults. How did the masterminds of the attack manage to avoid detection and carry out such a beastly act? What was South Africa's role in these attacks, and could they happen here too? Andrew Harding of the BBC and Ben Said of ENCA join me later today to discuss these questions. Both gentlemen have just returned from Kenya, where they were covering the story. After that discussion, we'll give you our winner and loser of the week. But first, let's discuss the top stories of the week with Moipone Malefane, political editor of the Sowetan and Sunday World, and Verashni Pillay, associate editor of the Mail and Guardian. Verashni, let me start with you. I mean, we've got big stories going on. eTolls, President Jacob Zuma flies off to New York, and surprise, surprise, his office says, well, President Zuma has signed the law, the eTolls into law, and we're all going to pay. Were you surprised by that, by the fact that he did it so soon, well, just before the election?
I think everyone was surprised, Justice. Certainly Ota, who was in court at the time that it was being signed at the Supreme Court of Appeals, still engaging the court process to set aside this decision for the eTolls. So I think they were taken by surprise. A lot of people in other parts of government were taken by surprise. The DA themselves came out and said it's quite strange and disrespectful almost of Zuma to go ahead and sign that bill while it was still in court, and a little bit disrespectful of the court process.
But a lot of people had said, no, this is a big election issue, and President Zuma would never do it with, what, 6, 7, 8 months before an election? And he went and did it. Is it likely to cost him votes, Moipone?
I don't think so. Remember, eToll is based, it was built on a debt. So at the end of the day, government has to pay the debt. However, all political parties, I think what we have to look out for is how they're going to factor the eToll into their manifestos. Obviously, the ANC will have to explain to Gauteng people why they have to pay for eTolls. And the Democratic Alliance that is hoping to win Gauteng will obviously say why, if they will be elected into power, how they will make sure that they don't pay for the eTolls, who will pay for the eTolls.
President Zuma surely is aware of all this. What's he thinking? If everyone's going to take advantage of this, shouldn't he have then said, oh, maybe I'll wait until after the election?
I don't think he had a choice, quite frankly, Justice. I mean, if you had to look at the actual situation that the agency was in, if they had not paid back that debt, as my colleague here has said, you know, they would have been downgraded by Moody's, and that would have affected other state-owned enterprises, their borrowing abilities. What analysts were saying, Zuma had to pay back that debt. Government had to take care of that debt. They did not have a choice. Unfortunately, it trumped election concerns, as we've seen other things trump election concerns, quite frankly.
What about Cosatu? This is an ally of the ANC, and then has been protesting against the eTolls, and he turns around and says, no, I'm going ahead with this. Is Cosatu likely to budge and say, you know what, we're not giving you a vote in Gauteng at least?
I think we're likely to hear Cosatu saying we are in talks, or at the end to say this has been signed into a bill. Gauteng people have to understand. They still continue to say they are against the eTolls, but I don't think they have a choice, because already Cosatu has said he's going to support ANC going into the elections.
Yeah, this, Verashni, this sounds like very much like Cosatu. Oh, we hate gear, we hate this, we hate this, we hate that, but then, oh, okay, we're going to vote ANC.
I think a little bit of it's also dependent on Cosatu's internal strife and politics. I mean, we saw Vavi tweeting shortly after the announcement, I'm against the eTolls, and this makes me oppositional, according to my friends. And, you know, we're looking at his suspension, at him coming back against his enemies. So I think you're going to see a moderating of Cosatu, and I think eTolls will necessarily fall under that moderation, that political moderation that Cosatu is going to go through.
Now let's move on to Gauteng. The ANC in Gauteng, the Sunday Times carried a story saying, David Makura is saying, no, as Gauteng ANC, we're going to use President Zuma on big ticket stadium items, and we're going to use Thabo Mbeki on house-to-house visits to get him to convince the middle classes,
the intelligentsia,
yes, to vote for the ANC. Is this likely to fly at all? Will the ANC leadership allow this kind of thing?
Obviously, what we have heard from Secretary General Gwede Mantashe, and later today from Jackson Mthembu, who is the spokesperson for the ANC, I don't think they are happy with what Gauteng has said. Although in the afternoon, Gauteng province released a statement to say David Makura, who is the provincial secretary and the one who did the interview with Sunday Times, was sort of misinterpreted in the whole interview. He was giving an outline of what the province intends to do. But at the end of the day, I think we need to remember that Gauteng has always been a different province out of all the ANC provinces. Going to Polokwane, they wanted the middle road. They didn't want either President Jacob Zuma or then President Thabo Mbeki to take over ANC. But later, after being convinced, I think, then they decided to support President Jacob Zuma. And going to Mangaung, they also did not support President Jacob Zuma to be re-elected. They were behind Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe to take over the ANC.
Verashni, isn't this a different dynamic? The fact that suddenly someone is saying, here's Thabo Mbeki, here's Jacob Zuma. We think in this province, this one, meaning Thabo Mbeki, is more likely to be convincing to the electorate.
And I think that is what they were trying to say, and I think it might come out of some truth. We know that Gauteng is a bit worried. Gauteng ANC is worried about getting the vote. I mean, the DA is saying they think they can win by 51%. Even if that's a thumbsuck, it's concerning for the ANC, and they are worried. They're out there. EFF is making inroads into their base. Gang is making inroads into their base. They are getting worried, and they're grasping at people like Mbeki, people like Ramaphosa, because it is a largely middle-class province. Now, of course, this is a slap in the face for Zuma, is it not? And you can see that in the reaction from the ANC.
Well, this comes a few days after Professor Richard Calland at UCT says President Jacob Zuma doesn't read, or at least doesn't read the right stuff. So, I mean, isn't this the ANC itself speaking, or the ANC in Gauteng saying the same thing, Moipone?
I'm not sure, and I wish David Makhura in that interview, maybe if he had elaborated to say, why are they considering to bring former President Thabo Mbeki back, who has been sort of in political exile since he was recalled as President of the Republic. I think the first time we saw him participating in the ANC events, it was during the centenary last year. So maybe that is based on a research to say former President Thabo Mbeki will be the best person to convince middle class to vote for the ANC.
Verashni, last question to you. Gauteng seems to feature a lot. It seems to be the province that will be hugely fought for in this upcoming election. Do you see truth in that DA thing that they could take this province?
Quite frankly, I think it's unlikely. I think the DA is talking big, but you know, it's very hard to forecast elections. I think the people who tend to get it right are like the HSLC. They tend to do really large surveys, but the surveys that we see, the polls ahead of elections, always tend to be wrong, actually. Analyst Stephen Friedman actually said this the other day. He went and did a study and he realized all the polls ahead of elections.
Some of my best friends are political analysts.
So I don't want to forecast, but I will say it's going to be tricky and it's hard to call. And the ANC, I think, are maybe in trouble.
Indeed. Guys, thanks so much for your time. I hope to see you again as we go towards the election.
Thank you.
After the break, we speak to two journalists who have just returned from Kenya about how the world can stop attacks such as the one we saw in Nairobi.
News that moves. ENCA.com.